Very pleased to have all of you here today. We are celebrating a quite significant accomplishment here today. So Professor James Robinson of the University of Chicago, Harris School of Public Policy, and Department of Political Science, celebrated for the Nobel in Economics, which was awarded very, very early this morning. We will begin with some remarks from university leaders and faculty, and then Professor Robinson, followed by a question and answer session for members of the media. To begin our program, I hope you join me in welcoming President Paul Alvasados from the University of Chicago to the podium. Thank you.
Good morning, and what a joy it is to be here with you today, James. My congratulations to you. What a special moment it is, and to acknowledge the importance and the special character of the research that you have done with others in such a beautiful way. It speaks to me very directly. We're just chatting about this, that I grew up in a society at the time that was under a dictatorship and where all the institutions were thwarted because of cronyism and other things like that, and just the feeling that nothing could advance. So James's research, I think it really lays bare how inclusive institutions really matter to the prosperity of a society in the deepest way. And so it's careful and thoughtful scholarship. We were just talking about how he has spent so much time both doing field work and teaching in Bolivia, Colombia, Haiti, Nigeria, and other places like that, where the power of his ideas is going to help transform those societies to the better. And so that's a beautiful thing, and we really celebrate it. It is in the very, very best tradition of University of Chicago scholarship that understands things very deeply, keeps a focus on the important things, and cares greatly about the betterment of the world around us. James, you are the 101st Nobel laureate associated with the University of Chicago, the 34th in the field of economics. So we're extremely proud of what you have done to add to this. I will say that I think we have other colleagues, esteemed colleagues here today who have been recognized in this way. I see Douglas Diamond is here. I see Lars Hansen is here. And perhaps there are others that have... Are there others I've missed here today that I didn't see already? All right. Okay. So thank you all. And we do want to thank you for bringing this distinction to the university, to the Harris School, to our political science colleagues here, and to just acknowledge what a wonderful thing it is for the deep work that you've done over a long period of time, carefully and thoughtfully. It's wonderful to see it recognized in this way. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Ethan Bonita-Mesquita. I'm the Dean of the Public Policy School, the Harris School of Public Policy here at the university. It's a real honor and pleasure to join with the President and all of you to congratulate our colleague Jim Robinson on this extraordinary achievement, even if that means it's going to be impossible to get him to faculty meetings this month. Jim is a true intellectual, a scholar whose work is of such substantive depth and methodological breadth that it set the agenda in multiple academic fields. This is a prize that's going to be celebrated not just by economists, but political scientists, historians, ethnographers, anthropologists, Africanists, Latin Americanists. Not all of them will love the work, but they'll talk about it, and they're aware of it. Indeed, in violation of the spirit of the University of Chicago, because it's a celebratory day, I myself am going to forego any critiques. It's hard to think of a major question in politics or policy for which Jim's work is not kind of the first stopping point for anybody seeking a deeper understanding or answer. Indeed, although Jim's best known for the work on institutions and development, along with the worldwide bestsellers that were cited in the Nobel Prize report, Literally, I'm not making this up. Last week, I was talking with a group of Harris policy students, and I pointed to a nearly 25-year-old article of Jim and Darones, his co-laureate, in the American Political Science Review, as kind of the essential argument for understanding the politics underlying the recent dock workers strike. Jim's work is of extraordinary breadth in understanding what's going on in society. His research on institutions and the political determinants of societal thriving set the agenda for a generation of scholars who are seeking to understand how to create peace and prosperity where there was conflict and poverty. At the heart of Jim and his collaborators' insight is an understanding of the crucial role of political institutions in fostering societal thriving. They argued that if those in power can seize wealth, then citizens are going to be disincentivized from investing or building. And therefore, political institutions that constrain leaders from expropriating wealth, more so than factors that had been previously pointed to, like geography or culture, are the key to understanding what makes a society wealthy, peaceful, and successful. Now, of course, it's one thing to have an idea. It's another thing entirely to convince anybody that it's true. And Jim and his colleagues were among the very first to point out you can't simply compare countries with different institutions and different growth trajectories and conclude it was the institutions that did the work. Correlation, as we all know, is not causation. So to test these ideas, they devised ingenious empirical strategies to try and get at causality. Perhaps most celebrated, they explored the idea that the disease environment at the time of colonization set patterns of settlement in places where the disease environment was unpleasant. Colonists didn't want to settle there, and they set up sort of purely extractive, exploitative institutions and relationships with their colonies, whereas in places that were more hospitable, colonists moved and settled and built, and they brought with them inclusive political institutions which far outlasted the time of colonization itself. And it is therefore by sort of leveraging this difference in early disease environment that we can learn something about the long-lasting causal effect of institutions on economic growth. This was developed in a series of incredibly important papers and books, perhaps the most celebrated of which helps us understand a 500-year historical pattern of a reversal of fortune whereby countries that were poor at the time in 1500 versus countries that were rich flipped as their institutions differed and set them on different growth trajectories. In his work, I cannot overstate the way in which it changed the intellectual agenda in the study of politics and economics. A generation of scholars were influenced by that work. And it's work whose impact extends well beyond the academy, from the United Nations to the World Bank to the halls of power all over the world. Leaders draw on Jim's insights as they seek to transform their societies for the better. Let me just add that this is also really a moment of great joy for the Harris School and our community. Since its founding, a core belief at the Harris School is that if one is serious about understanding policy, one has to be serious about understanding politics. And if one is serious about shaping policy, one has to be serious about shaping the political environment. To this end, we have built what we like to think is the world's most thriving collection of scholars dedicated to studying the intersection of politics and policy. And there's no one whose work more exemplifies that vision than Jim Robinson's. Jim's not just an extraordinary scholar and colleague. He's been a teacher, a mentor, and an inspiration to so many of us. Without commenting on relative age, let me just say for my own part, some of the earliest work that this prize honors was being published at the very start of my own career. And I took it as a model of the kind of scholarship that I and everyone in my generation of scholars aim to do. Work that grapples with the most fundamental questions while treating theory, evidence, history, and the real world with the utmost seriousness. It's a true inspiration. It's wonderful to see Jim's work recognized in this way. I can't think of anyone more deserving. Congratulations.
Thank you. I thought Ethan was going to talk about the paper where we claimed there was a unique Markov perfect equilibrium, and it turned out there was a mixed strategy equilibrium as well that we hadn't characterized. But luckily, he didn't mention that. Okay, thanks very much. It's been a rather surreal out-of-body experience so far today, and I expect that's going to carry on. So I'd just like to thank the President and Ethan for his very generous remarks, and just to say, obviously I'm just super happy. I think he was telling me this is a very University of Chicago award, and I agree with that. I've loved it every second since I've been here for the last 8.5 years. I've felt a kind of intellectual home at the university and in the Harris School and in the Department of Political Science, and I find the intellectual atmosphere so exciting and rewarding, and I really appreciate the way the university kind of believed in me and got me to come here, and it's been great. And what's happened to the Harris School has been great. I don't know where to start talking. I probably shouldn't say anything. I'd just like to thank, Daron and Simon and I. We've been working together for 30 years almost. Daron and I met in March 1992 when I gave a job talk at the London School of Economics, and he was a PhD student. He sat, I can still see his face, he sat in the front row and kind of objected to almost everything I said. Like, no, if you change assumption 2, that would never go through, that result. I was like, who is this guy? He's so annoying. Then we went out to dinner at this Indian restaurant in Covent Garden with the search committee, and he was the sort of the star student, and we sat next to each other and started talking. And as we left the old St. Clement's building from the London School of Economics, which is now demolished, he turned around and looked at me and said, have you read this paper by Norton Weingast, which is a very famous paper? And, in some sense, we've been researching that topic ever since. And I just, I would never have achieved anything without those two. So there's lots of other people I could thank as well. Mostly my wife, who has to cope with most things, and and who's experienced so much of this together. And my thesis advisor, Truman Bewley, who I've realized, he was the first person I texted this morning, who I realize, it's funny how these things take time for you to realize, but I realize how much of my kind of attitude towards social science and research I kind of got from being Truman's student. So anyway, I won't say anything else. There's lots to say, but thank you all for coming, and it's a very special day. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Professor Robinson. And I would like to invite our other two speakers up to the stage, if you would, please. I do want you guys. Otherwise, there's 2 empty seats. Nobody would drink the water. And what we would like to do is just open up to the media to ask questions, and we'll take about 15 minutes to do so. And then if we do want to spend a few minutes afterwards doing some photos, we can do that as well. So please, if you do have a question, please hands up, and we'll be glad to get going. Yes, sir. Or ma'am.
Okay, my name is Shyla. I guess my first question is, what was your reaction when you found out you were first awarded this amazing award?
Disbelief, I think. I thought I was sleeping with my phone off, so my wife woke me up and said, "You have to get up. You have to get up." I said, "What for?" She said, "You won the Nobel Prize." I thought she was kidding. So I think there's so much fantastic research in social science, in economics, and political science. I'm actually in the political science department. So we should. There's so much there are so many fantastic scholars and so much fantastic research. You could think of hundreds of people who should get the Nobel Prize. So I never really thought about it very much, but I was surprised and, of course, delighted in a bemused way. Yes.
Terrific.
Paul, if you could repeat the questions too, that'd be great.
I will do that. Thank you. Any other questions?
James, you shared with me earlier how there were some moments where you first realized what methods would be needed for you to make your discoveries and so on. I mean, just say a little bit about some of the moments when the research really advanced and what that was like for you.
Well, I think when we started working, when we started working on these problems that we got the Nobel Prize for, Daron and I, Daron grew up in Istanbul, and my father was a sort of itinerant engineer who spent most of his life working overseas, so I lived overseas when I was young. So we were very interested in these problems, but we found it very difficult to sort of approach them because we had all these intuitions, but the intuitions didn't sort of coincide with the way people studied the problems. So I think we had to find a kind of entry point in some sense. And we both of us read, when we were undergraduates, Douglas North and Robert Thomas's book, The Rise of the Western World, which was about the kind of institutional transformation that created the Industrial Revolution and this sort of so-called phenomenon of the Great Divergence. So we, both of us, had independently read that book, and I just mentioned how we first started talking about Douglas North's work the 2 hours after we first met, and so. But how do you approach that? How do you measure these things, and how do you? So we started working on that. We started reading a lot of history and sort of thinking about how to approach it, and we started putting data together. But it has all of these problems that Ethan talked about in terms of how do you know what's causing what, and what's the sort of forcing variable here, there we were very fortunate because Daron was, so we had all this data and we started working with Simon and one of Daron's colleagues, also the now Nobel laureate Josh Angrist, Josh sort of understood most of these things before anybody else in the economics profession, how you dealt with these issues of kind of causal inference. And so Daron started co-teaching labor economics at MIT with Josh. So, none of us had any idea how to conduct an empirical study, in fact. So then I remember we were talking on the telephone, and I was like talking about how we were going to analyze the data, and Darren was like, no, I know how we're going to do it. I know how we're going to do it. I know how we're going to do it. I'm like, what? Yeah, I know. Angrist, he's the guy who knows. So we were able to kind of use a lot of techniques from labor economics and kind of other parts of economics, and to kind of import them into studying these issues of comparative development, which turned out to be very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. I think I saw a hand that went up a little bit earlier up there. Yes, please.
You know all it is. As somebody with a background in social sciences, I just want to know what you hope your impact of your research is going to be on society.
The question is, what area do you hope your research is going to have an impact in society?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. Like we have a complicated view of the world in the sense that, I'm not someone who thinks that economists have a kind of cure for everything, or they have some silver bullet, or, we just bring some evidence to the table and everyone is going to wake up, and my experience working in, developing countries and in the global south is that people are usually much more aware of the problems than Western academics are, and so their problem is, how to cooperate, how to kind of find a way of collaborating and trying to change their own societies, how to build a project to build a different Nigeria or a different Colombia. And so I think maybe ideas are important in terms of people levers or giving people ways to think about the problems in their society. So I think that's the way I think about this more than, like, I have some estimates, you know, and now I know that beta is 3.2, that's going to change your life. That's not the way we think about the world, and that's why I became a political scientist, you know. I'm not just an economist, I'm a political scientist too, because then the world starts getting much more complicated when you think about the politics. But for us, you know, that's the challenge in creating prosperity out of poverty.
Good question. Thank you. Other questions from the audience, please. Maybe I can ask the question that, how do you plan on celebrating? What are your plans?
I don't know. I don't have any plans. Do we have plans?
There's an event at 3:30 in the office.
I think some former PhD students of mine who are in the city would be coming over this evening, but we don't have that. They're also organising a conference, my 65th birthday next February, so that may escalate in scale, I suspect.
Okay.
I suspect.
Great. Good. Any final questions, please? I see a hand up there.
What do you think makes your partnership with Asimoglu and Johnson so fruitful, and what would you suggest to early researchers how to build these partnerships?
The question was, what makes your partnership with your colleagues as impactful and powerful as it has been?
I think you know, we all get on very well at a personal level. You know, they're all my best friends, and I think we're good at doing different things also, you know, like we're good at different things, and we all have our strengths, and we kind of recognize that, so it makes it very easy to sort of divide tasks. And I think, you know, in terms of, you know, young scholars, I try to emphasize this when I teach, you know, but although the methodology is very important, for me what really matters is like the question. It's like, what's the question? Sure. You know, is that interesting? Is that an important question? And the methodology is great, but, you know, the way you do social sciences, you come up with a question that you're passionate about, and then you answer it with the best methodology you can put your hands on, you know. So I think that's really the way to do it, and I think if you look at all our work, that's how we started. And questions come from kind of everywhere, from reading books and from immersion in other areas and within social science, you know, so I think that's we've always been like that. The three of us, we all thought the same way. You know, when I was a PhD student at Yale, there were sort of things I knew how to do, you know, like here's what I learned in this class, you know, here's what a result looks like, this is what a research, and then there were all these other things that I was interested in, and there was almost no kind of intersection between those two things. And then when Daron and I met, you know, we had exactly the same impulse, like he thought in exactly the same way as that, and we were like, okay, well, you know, so we better get on bringing them together. Like, what are we waiting for? You know, like we have time where, you know, and that's another thing which is, you know, it took, you know, we started working together 30 years ago. I mean, 32 years ago, Daron and I started discussing ideas, and then Simon came on board a bit later. But I think it's that length, that kind of arc, which I find very fulfilling, you know. We've been working at it a long time, and we still have some things to say, I think. I hope.
More to come. Please.
Professor, thank you so much. My question is, what's your advice for young researchers like us who are passionate about, the issues in emerging market? So, what's your best advice for them? How should they pursue their goal, and what best helped you in this whole journey with your partnership with the other professor at MIT?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just them. I think I've been extremely fortunate. I've been helped many times by people who've, you know, believed in me, I have to say, even when I probably didn't believe in myself. So I think that's been great. I could start listing people's names, but, you know, that would be boring. But they know who they are. So I think, I just think, like, you know, in terms of trying to find a research question and trying to, like, for me, you know, I think, you know, you have to try to understand it from the perspective of who you're trying to study. in the sense that, one of the things for me, which was an enormous kind of stumbling block intellectually, was that I realized that a lot of the social science that I'd learnt, that I kind of took for granted as the sort of framework for thinking about the world, in some sense was a product of particular histories or particular epochs in kind of Western, development, were generalizations about the world. Marxism might be a great example. Marx was a very brilliant man and he came up with a theory, but it was a theory based on what he observed in 19th century Western Europe. But the rest of the world isn't like that. So if I take a theory, whose elements are kind of built on that very specific historical trajectory, and I move to Africa with it, or China, or India, or whatever, like, I could try to force everything, into, where's the proletariat, or or I could try to see the society on its own terms and try to think about the society on its own terms. I think humans are the same all over the world. In my experience, my friends in Africa have the same. They'd like access to what I have had in my life, to schools, to opportunities, to travel, to whatever. So there's we all share this history on the planet, human beings, but human beings have built very different societies in different parts of the world. And I would say the first thing is to think about it like that, and think about a question that's relevant to those people and to their context and to their aspirations. And, I think, as I said to this other question, for me it's really about the question and trying to find the right kind of question. Then you worry about the research design.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Anything else, Ethan, that you'd like to share? Plans for the department?
We're going to keep doing, Jim's going to be back at work this afternoon, so we're going to keep building around this idea.
I have a lecture to make up.
Yeah, he's missing a class. No, couldn't be happier, and it's just amazing news. So.
Well, congratulations again. And maybe if you two can stay up here for a few minutes, we can take some questions, if come up individually, or to take some photos as well. Thank you all for joining, coming in person. Thanks to those that have turned into the webcast. Have a great day. Thank you.